And you're talking to her, not to me.
Hi, good morning, good morning. I'm sitting here with
Ruth Danis.
Ruth Danis, and Ruth, I would like you to just tell me a little bit about how you got involved or how you discovered Solomon Schechter.
Okay. I was a member of the Forest Hills Jewish Center, and Rabbi Boxer was one of the original instigators and pushers to develop a Solomon Schechter school, a conservative day school. I had a background for that. I'm a survivor from the 1940 invasion of Belgium by the Germans. We spent some time getting here, like 18 months. And in Belgium, where I come from, my father was one of the founders of the Tachkamoni School, which was a day school for boys. Just as the war was about to start, they started a day school for girls. So I had an interest in it right from the beginning. I was very much interested. I was a Zionist, and it was natural for me to endorse what Rabbi Boxer was trying to develop, and I got involved. My eldest daughter was in their first graduating class, and the other two followed. They had a very good education.
Now, when you say you got involved, did you mean in terms of
Well, I said my children. That was the first involvement.
Of course. Structuring the school in any way? Were you involved in the educational transformation
I
of
was
it?
very active as a PTA member. I was the third president of the PTA. Adele Kronsberg was the first, and Lillian Kapnick was the second, and I was the third. Helen Hamlin was the fourth, and I think Doris Goldstein was the fourth. It was the fifth, would be. We did a lot as PTA members. It was the beginning of a school. It started with 33 children. We helped with the lunch program. We helped with the transportation program. We made costumes for their plays. We did whatever we could to help. And
At that point, the school was where it is now currently, or were you involved in the Regal Park?
The school started at the Regal Park Jewish Center, was Rabbi Darby's synagogue. And the reason it was there was because the Forest Hills Jewish Center was concerned that it would interfere with their Hebrew school. So Rabbi Darby was able to convince his members that it would be a good thing, and that's where they were housed until they got the new building.
So they stayed in Regal Park for a couple of years in the Jewish Center? I don't remember.
Oh, it was several years till they built the new building. And that's a separate story all in its own. The original group that founded the school were the rabbis of all the congregations. There was Rabbi Boxer, Rabbi from Forest Hills, Rabbi Darby from Regal Park. There was, let's see, Kew Gardens Hills, Rabbi Kirschblum, Middle Village, let's see who else we had. I'll come to some of the names.
So we have these rabbis who come up with the idea to create this
They
school.
all joined together.
They joined together.
Yes, and they each brought members of their congregation with them who would help fund it. That, you know, you can talk a school, but you have to have money. And that's always a problem, which we'll get to later. Rabbi Boxer had Charlie Altman, Saul Heifman, William Verständig and his wife Martha. Let's see.
So these gentlemen basically
Rabbi
were the financiers.
Fenster was from Rabbi Fenster, who sent 3 of his children to the school. Rabbi Boxer's son, the youngest of his children, was already at Ramaz because he was older. He was too old to start the school. But Fenster had 3 of his children there. Whatever, we can get to that.
And you had at that point, you had, which daughter was in the school?
Okay, Marion is the oldest. She went to kindergarten in Manhattan before we moved to Forest Hills. Then she went to 1st grade in Forest Hills at PS 101. And then 2nd grade, they started 1st and 2nd grade together. She was in the 2nd grade.
And Naomi started in
Naomi
first grade.
started the next year. She was in 1st grade when Marion was in 3rd grade. And then 3 years later, Debbie started.
So at some point you had all 3 daughters in the school at the same
Right.
time. Right.
The youngest of the 3, first of all, I must tell you about the school. If you think they liked it, 2 of them sent their own children there. So that tells you a lot about what they thought of the school.
That's right. Your grandchildren graduated.
My grandchildren of 2 of my daughters, one had moved out of the city, so she couldn't do that.
So there was a nice continuity. If your daughters felt that they received the education that they wanted,
Right.
and therefore their children would go to the school too.
I spoke to Marion last night, and she emphasized the wonderful education she had. She learned writing from Mrs. Fischler in 6th grade or in 8th grade, and still loves to write. She learned about society and people, and she still follows that up in her career. She's a physician. She works for the NIH, the National Institute of Health, and travels all over the world to help people get medical coverage. So, and that's part of her background, which she feels she owes the origin to
the school.
some of her teaching there.
Yeah. And Naomi where's Naomi these days?
Naomi is the managing editor of Lilith magazine, and she writes, and she also sent her children to Schechter. She also is very sociable, and they had a Mr. Gladstone, who was Yaakov Gladstone. He's still around. You could speak to him. He was an outstanding teacher. Another outstanding teacher was Mrs. Rubel, who taught them music. With Mr. Gladstone, they did things like they participated in programs like a television program. They did a dance program at the World's Fair under the New York State Pavilion. They danced. They did a dance. Mrs. Goldstein's daughter, Sandra, was in one of the plays. She was the main actress, and it was very nice. She was, I have the names here somewhere, of the Hasidic wedding.
So you think those, if you could name a teacher that had a very special impact on the girls, on your daughters, those would be the 2 teachers that would stand out in your mind?
Well, Mrs. Fischler, Mrs. Levine, let's see, who else was that here? Well, Rhoda Fischler is the one who influenced for the writing. Rabbi Kaplan was a wonderful principal. It was a very good school.
He served as principal from the very beginning of the school? I don't remember.
I think the 2nd year.
The 2nd year?
Right.
So basically, if they send their own children to the school, the education was superior in their eyes, and they felt that to continue with the Jewish day school.
Right. In fact, Jillian, the youngest, Debbie's youngest, went through high school with them. And Debbie's very critical that the conservative movement did not support the high school sufficiently that it closed.
Well, we try to have a high school next door, right? Exactly. Is that the one you're talking about? Or are you talking about Manhattan?
No. She went to Manhattan.
Manhattan, Schechter, Manhattan.
Yeah.
Right.
I know they put up a building hoping to have a high school, but they didn't.
Our high school next door to us.
What they did was give the school income from the rent.
This is true.
And there's always a conflict between educational values and business values. and that's a problem.
Well, without that,
Sometimes the education gets sacrificed to the business.
to the business. Well, the school was run by businessmen at that time, correct?
Yes, that's another issue that I feel strongly about. Mr. Heiferman, who was a Forest Hills gentleman, was wonderful and generous, and he had a great role in putting up the Forest Hills Jewish Center. He was in real estate, lost a daughter in childbirth, and sort of as a consolation, Rabbi Boxer kind of gave him the job of being executive director, or I don't know what title he had, but he sort of felt that it was his business to run the school. And eventually that created the split with Rabbi Kaplan. And that's always a problem that you have to look out for.
Yeah.
I don't know what the school is today. I haven't been in touch with them. But when my children were there, it was top-notch. It was just
Well,
great.
right now the school is good. The school is
They
good.
need to have a principal who believes in conservative Judaism, which today is not the case, or hasn't been, and that's not good. It has to be somebody who believes in the principles of the school and
Enforces it that way.
enforces
Right.
it that way.
Right. Well, it is still conservative day school. There's no doubt about it.
It is,
Right.
but they don't always strengthen that value of it, that aspect of it.
Yeah. So after Schechter, your daughters went on to high school and college, and just give me a little history about where they went to school
After
after
Schechter,
Schechter.
Marion went to the High School of Music and Art, and then she went to the University of Chicago, where her first biology teacher converted her to medicine. Naomi went to Forest Hills High School and then went to Stony Brook. And Debbie went to Forest Hills High School and then went to Queens College.
So you must have attended a lot of events at the school, I'm sure, during the times when your daughters attended.
Right.
Is there any particular, whether it was a holiday celebration at school?
Oh, Marion's graduation was a performance, a debate of whether man fulfilled his potential. There was the pro and the con, and the rest of the students were witnesses. It was fabulous. And that's part of what made Marion who she is.
So this was her graduation?
This was her graduation ceremony. It took place at the Regal Park Jewish Center. It was fabulous.
You still remember it today, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting. And as a PTA mom, and which you were, I'm president, and you should know that PTA is really generously paying for this whole project, which is
That's
really
very
very
nice.
gracious of them. And PTA is still strong at Schechter. You know, it's gone through
That's
many
great.
generations, but I'm sure you and your through your connections with PTA must have made a lot of good friends
Oh yes,
and
still friends.
socialized with a lot
Right.
of these women.
Helen Hamlin is one of them. She was the president after I was, and she works today. She's over 90, and she's still working for the United Nations Senior Committee of some kind, and travels for them. Amazing people.
That's quite a lady, yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. Because I know when my kids were in the school, my social calendar revolved around,
Around the school.
Around the school.
Absolutely.
you know, our weekends. We had to look and see what was going on. Besides the bar mitzvah and the bat mitzvah
Right.
circuit, let's put that aside for a moment.
Right.
Even from kindergarten, I made one of my best friends I met in kindergarten.
Uh-huh.
And some of the grades, some of the kids stay friendly. Are your daughters friends with some of their classmates?
Yes.
They remain friends today?
Yeah.
Family?
Naomi particularly.
Yeah.
Yeah. One of them is Madeline, who was just here a couple of weeks ago.
Is that Madeline
Madeline Brunitsky.
Brunitsky. I have her in the, I have your daughter's yearbook here, so
Oh, okay.
I remember that name, yeah. So she came to visit you, Madeline?
Well, she stayed at Naomi's with her husband, and they came here for breakfast Sunday morning.
That's a
Really
long-time friend, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah,
I was friendly with her parents.
with your parents.
Yeah.
I know, because I see that some of the grades stay close together and some of them are not as connected,
Right.
you know, but that's to be expected.
Right.
How about Debbie? Is she friendly with people from her year?
Not as much. Not as much. You know, the problems that schools have, this school has also. There was bullying. Marion was very unhappy socially because of kids teasing. And, you know, she's not particularly friendly with, although she's been in touch with a couple of people. Sandra Kronsberg is in Washington. She's been in touch with Doris Goldstein's middle daughter, lives in Washington also. And she's been in touch with Marion. They're both near Washington. So.
Bullying happens back then, it happens now. I mean, it's always been in the school.
Realize it wasn't called bullying in those days, but now I realize that's exactly what it was.
What'd they call it?
Teasing.
Teasing.
Yeah. Making kids miserable.
Right. But I'm sure your daughter didn't spend much time in the principal's office, I have a feeling.
Not really. Debbie a little more. She was the youngest. She didn't like doing homework, but Rabbi Kaplan once called in, looked at her notebook to see what, you know, stuff like that, but that shouldn't be on the program here. But she did very well ever since. She works in an organization of lawyers' membership and runs their office.
So basically, you said you had some experience in Belgium with the Jewish Day School, how it was evolving.
It's still in existence today.
It still exists. I mean, in this area in particular, there's some very good public schools. So my question is, why the Jewish Day School?
Yiddishkeit. To learn to be a Jew, to know why you're a Jew and what being a Jew means, to learn Hebrew.
To have a full day.
That's the purpose of the Hebrew Day School.
To have a full day of it. Right.
Well, if your Jewish education is equivalent to your secular education, it means a different thing in your life than if it's just something that you go, you know, a little bit in the afternoon and it's not terribly serious. Even though it's serious when you're doing it, you don't get the same kind of depth, same kind of value system that you get from a day school.
From the day school. The day school teaches you more of the values.
Living Jewish, learning Hebrew, being involved with Israel. That's all part of the day school, much more deeply.
Well, I could tell you why we sent our kids there, because my husband didn't want them to have a Hebrew school, a limited background.
Right.
He wanted them to be really engrossed in it.
Right.
And also, I mean, selfishly, it did free up the weekend a little bit. You don't have to go on a Sunday or in the afternoons. But the depth that you learn is much greater.
It's part of your life. It's equivalent to the rest of what you learn in school. Instead of something added on.
You don't get that in a Hebrew school. Plus, you get it at home too. I'm sure.
Hopefully.
Hopefully.
Yeah.
You know, the affiliation of a lot of our students today, they're not affiliated with synagogues, unfortunately. I think from your daughters and their peers were more synagogue members,
right?
More
well,
frequent.
The family has to be part of it.
True.
The parents need to be believers and live that life. Because if it's just something you put on to go to school, then it's not really you. That's what the day school should be.
I think that's so true, because I know I learned from my kids. You know, I was brought up conservative, but they would come home and teach me things
Mhm.
that I didn't know, and particularly around holidays. Some holidays that I never even heard of, growing up.
Mhm.
And I thought it was a beautiful thing. The best thing was to have a sukkah. You never had a sukkah,
Right.
What a joy that was to
Yeah.
do that and to decorate. So my kids in particular, really educated me,
Mhm.
and I'm grateful for that.
And now you're still involved.
And I'm still involved.
That's great.
And the PTA has gone through its changes for sure.
Mhm.
I was a president once also,
Mhm.
and I love being in the school. I don't know about you,
Mhm.
but I love watching the kids, and I was fortunately, to be able to be in the school.
See, in my time, when my children were there, most of the mothers were not working. So they had time to be involved. And we did get involved in every which way possible. Today, it's probably much more difficult for mothers to be involved. But it doesn't mean that you are not part of it. Today, there's not as much involvement of the parents, I'm sure, in assisting in different ways.
It's true. It's hard to get them into the school. They still run a lunch program, so we do have helps for that. And when the Pesach Seders, the moms come in. And
Assemblies,
dads.
programs.
Exactly. But you're right. More people are working now, and it's hard to get people to help out, as opposed to your peers. They, like you say, you were able to get into the school more.
Right.
Right. And you enjoyed it, right?
Oh, yeah.
So.
And we made friends. I moved here from Manhattan and lived in a private house and didn't know, this was where I met my Jewish friends.
Between school and the synagogue.
Right.
That becomes the life.
I had a Hebrew education. I trained in the beginning in Antwerp, and then I went on here. I went to Herzliya, and I went to a Hebrew teachers training school. So I was really involved in the education, and it's helpful. You can support your children.
You were able to do homework with the kids. You were able to speak the Hebrew, right? You knew the
They
language.
really didn't need it, but if they did, I probably could have. Yeah.
That's great. That's really great. Do you want to chime in?
Questions about our daughter's relationships with Schechter, these issues of the day, as women, whatever. That's one area.
Yeah.
And the other thing is, did her daughters send their kids to equivalent schools?
They did.
They did, yeah.
You could talk to Naomi about that.
Okay, so I know your daughters, a few of them. I know Debbie well, and I know Debbie had sent her children all to Schechter, Queens. Did the other girls send also to Schechter?
Naomi
Queens?
did.
They all did. And
Marion moved out of New York, so she couldn't send them.
She couldn't.
But she did send them to what she could. They went to a very creative private school, but not a Hebrew school. And they went to the synagogue down there. They were in North Carolina, Chapel Hill.
In Chapel Hill. So when it came to, let's say, just trying to figure out for high schools, was continuing in a Jewish high school a possibility for the girls and their children, or not?
No, there was no equivalent. They did go to Prosdor at the seminary. That's what there was.
Right.
And they went there through their high school years.
Oh, the Prosdor program in Manhattan?
Yes, we had to get them into Manhattan every Sunday morning and once during the week. I think eventually they had the weekday program here in Forest Hills, so they didn't have to travel twice to Manhattan.
So if Schechter wasn't conceived, where would your daughters have gone to school?
I never thought about it because it was conceived. I knew about it as soon as I moved here. I found out that they were doing that.
Okay, because I found out
The
about
only
Schechter.
alternative would have been to send them to the Hebrew school at the Forest Hills Jewish Center,
Right.
which would not have been as fundamental education.
Did Rabbi Boxer have children in Schechter?
No, his daughter was quite a few years older, and his son was already at Ramaz. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
His children were a couple of years too old for the school. The school started too late for them.
School started too late. Well, I'm just trying to figure out, in terms of education, is there anything that you felt that the school didn't provide? I mean, we can be negative, it's okay.
Yeah.
You know, is there anything that you felt that we lacked in the early years that could have been made
Better? I can't think of anything really. They had wonderful teachers. The teachers were extraordinary. We had a concert, a Khalil concert here in my dining room with Mrs. Rubel. The kids were all playing the Khalilim or Khalilot, I'm not sure. They had dance programs they participated in, and I can't think of anything that they could have done.
Well, they must have been
didn't.
They actually performed in your house?
Yeah. Everything, Mr. Gladstone, for instance, visited every home of his students. They were really involved teachers.
That's pretty admirable. I don't think anybody would do that.
It's very admirable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So he actually got to see the homes where the kids are growing up in.
Right.
So you could get a better understanding of the child.
That's right. He was.
Wow.
I have a few names here that I. Oh, yeah. Mary said that debate that they had. Man was fundamentally good or bad. That was the topic of their discussion at their graduation.
For graduation?
Yeah.
So now we have graduation, they do the cantata.
Yeah.
They get their awards.
Uh-huh.
There's nothing going on like that.
No, they.
It sounds like a very in-depth topic to be discussing at a graduation. Oh, interesting.
You want to turn it off a bit? You want to turn it off a little bit?
Don't
Give us
worry
some
about it.
thinking.
Yeah. Just trying to figure out what kind of the graduation. Did they ever have the graduations in Forest Hills Jewish Center? I thought that's where they went
No.
after. No?
No, it was all at the Regal Park Jewish Center
In the beginning, I guess, the beginning years.
until they moved to their new building.
Because now the graduations are at Forest Hills Jewish Center mostly. We tried it in the school one year. That was okay. You know, and what I'm doing at the school is the alumni work, so I'm just trying to connect to all the various classes, and you know, it's been working out pretty nicely. I do get in touch with several people. I mean, I've met with Debbie, and that's really been fun.
Do you want some names of people who are around?
In terms
A
of
couple
teachers,
of them are not allowed. I mean, students.
are these students from your daughter's classes?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know what? A number of them are not here anymore.
I think that's probably true. Same
Of
with
the
the teachers.
students.
Of the students.
I'm talking about the students.
A lot of them probably moved on to Israel too. Did a lot of people move to Israel from those years? That you know?
The ones who moved to Israel was Fenster and his family.
Yeah.
He moved and his children moved. And I think the third of his children, the eldest was in Marion's class. She lives in Boston. The second died, Jonathan. Jeremy is in Israel, and I think he runs a yeshiva.
Oh, nice.
And has about 13 children.
You said you taught art and sculpture in the schools? What school did you teach in? I don't remember.
Pierce 111, 112, and 166 in Astoria.
In Astoria. Did you ever teach anybody in Schechter? Did you ever come and do a lesson in school there?
I'm trying to remember.
We have an amazing art teacher now. He's really wonderful.
Yes,
yeah.
that's great.
He's great. He does some beautiful.
They had, as a matter of fact, Naomi and Debbie were discussing it. They all did the same thing.
What do you mean?
Like they made bookends, for instance, and everybody made the same bookends. Or they made some other project like that. So Debbie explained to Naomi, you know, he had these children once a week for 45 minutes. It's not like when you have 3 hours to work with and you can work with each individual child. It has to be that way.
It's true.
Yeah, that's right.
Do you remember doing the cover, the Siddur cover and the
Yes,
Chumash cover?
right.
I bet you made your own. You made your own cover, right? I sent mine out. I couldn't embroider. You know the cover.
I didn't make, the children
The
made.
children made the covers?
Oh, maybe, I don't remember.
Together, maybe.
I don't remember.
They had that back. They had
oh,
the Chumash
yes,
celebration,
yes,
the Siddur
yes,
celebration.
absolutely.
Yeah.
It was a big thing.
They didn't have the trip to Israel though, right? No, that started.
No,
That started in the late '90s, I believe.
no,
The
but my
eighth
children
graders.
have all been to Israel.
They've all been to. I'm sure you've been to Israel too.
Oh, many times.
times.
For my 80th birthday, I took them all. We hired a bus and a guide. It was great.
That's wonderful.
So,
That's great. It's really you're basically one of our
a Schechterite.
A Schechterite. Schechterite. A long time ago. Yeah.
I can give you one more question, and it's a question that always comes from my frame of reference.
Are you part of Schechter too?
No.
Okay.
My relationship with Schechter was born of doing business, but I've made some really nice friends since. I went to what I called a conservative temple
Uh-huh.
as a kid, but Schechter, although it defines itself as conservative,
Right.
is certainly much more orthodox than
Then-
what I called conservative growing up.
Uh-huh.
So I'm just interested in hearing you talk about what it was that appealed to you about conservative Judaism to begin with, whether it was in Belgium or you took it to Schechter when you came here. I'd just like to hear your
There
frame
was
of
no
reference.
conservative Judaism in Belgium in those days. That was before conservative Judaism. I was part of an Orthodox family. And when I came here, I went to the shul was Orthodox. I felt more comfortable. It gave me a little more freedom.
So basically, your parents were Orthodox.
Yeah. My mom died when I was 10 years old, so I don't know what she would have been. But she died very young.
Because sometimes people refer to Schechter as a yeshiva, and I don't think that's true.
It's a day school.
It's
It's a
a day
conservative
school.
day school.
Now,
See, that's part of the problem. There's a little confusion between people who think it's a yeshiva, which a yeshiva is not conservative.
that would be Orthodox all the way, right?
Right. And so it's important, that's why I mentioned before, it's important that they have a principal who is conservative, that they call it a conservative day school,
Right.
because that's what it's supposed to be.
Yeah.
It has no reason to be a conservative school if it's Orthodox, or has that aura of orthodoxy.
Right, because there's a difference. There's a major difference.
There's a major difference,
Right.
that your outlook on life is different.
Right. What you believe in is different too.
Right.
Yeah. I've been stopped in supermarkets and people would say to me, your children go to that yeshiva? And I'm like, no, they don't. They go to a Jewish day school.
Right.
People don't, that's where it is. They need to be educated into what that really is all about.
Yes.
Right. That's a very important piece. And I think you're right, the leadership has to be
The leadership needs to support it.
supported, right?
If they had an Orthodox principal there, or she spoke as an Orthodox, but I happen to be friendly with one of the parents, and she's very upset at the way she gets treated because she is conservative. And that's not right.
There's plenty of Orthodox schools in the area, but
Absolutely.
there's really only
Why
one.
is it that they send their children to Schechter?
It's a good question. Why?
So the emphasis has to be
On conservative.
strengthened.
That comes out through the teaching, through the marketing, and we started to do that as of late.
And through the Parents
And through the-
Association.
And through the PA, absolutely. Absolutely, yeah. Okay.
Did you, were you asked to sit separately in the synagogue?
No, never.
No.
Not here.
Okay.
Mm.
Didn't Mrs. Troy, help me if I'm wrong, didn't Mrs. Troy relate an anecdote where she experienced having to have done that, but she made her peace with it because she said, you know, there were so many other good elements of it that she accepted the reality that there were certain traditional things.
And for conservative to sit separately?
Well, I'm not sure. I just recall an
I
anecdote.
don't
like that.
remember. I don't remember. No. But I know when I spoke with Judy, for instance, she just felt like it was the only place to send her kids to school, you know, for her daughters, and that was it, you know, and there was no choice. I mean,
No, I would never have sent my daughters to a. There wasn't a yeshiva for girls anyway. Well, there was in Kew Gardens.
I think there's one in Holliswood also. There's
Yeah.
a girls' yeshiva.
Right.
But that wouldn't have been for your daughters. No.
No.
No. The conservative movement is really what gives them the more freedoms, basically. But yet they're grounded. They have the ground.
They're in the modern world.
We're in a modern world. And that's where we want to be. We don't want to be.
I guess Orthodox people wouldn't appreciate my saying that, but they're also in the modern world, but they separate themselves from it.
Okay. Is there anything else we want to ask? I think we're pretty much good.
I guess if you just want to sum up your feelings about the Schechter experience,
Yeah, so tell me
broad
why.
brush.
That's true. I mean, you know, in terms of, if you had to do it again, if you had to send the kids.
I don't know what the school is like today, but as the school was when they went, I would send them today.
Mm.
Definitely, because they got Zionism, they got religion, they got Hebrew, they got a feeling of commonality. It was a great school. They also got creativity and openness and a good education.
All summed up in one word. Schechter Queens. Why Schechter? That's what this is really all about. Why Schechter?
Right.
And it's honest. You're honest. You don't know what the school's like today, but you know,
Right.
your feelings were.
I hope that it continues in the same tradition.
Thank you. Okay. Good.
Is that what you wanted to hear?
Definitely. No, it was a
It
good
comes from the
summation.
heart. There was no artifice.
Absolutely.